Greetings, dear friends. We begin with a short tale by Jane Austen, written when she was just 12 years old. The Beautifull Cassandra is bold, absurd, and utterly charming, just like its heroine. What follows is an excursion of my own making, inspired by the Beautifull Cassandra but featuring a certain Miss Lydia Bennet instead. Happy listening. The Beautifull Cassandra. Cassandra was the daughter and the only daughter of a celebrated milliner in Bond Street. Her father was of noble birth, being the near relation of a duchess's butler. When Cassandra had attained her 16th year, she was lovely and amiable, and chancing to fall in love with an elegant bonnet her mother had just completed, bespoke by a countess, she placed it on her gentle head and walked from her mother's shop to make her fortune. The first person she met was a viscount, a young man no less celebrated for his accomplishments and virtues than for his elegance and beauty. She curtsied and walked on. She then proceeded to a pastry cook's, where she devoured 6 ices, refused to pay for them, knocked down the pastry cook, and walked away. She next ascended a hackney coach, and ordered it to Hampstead, where she was no sooner arrived than she ordered the coachman to turn around and drive her back again. Being returned to the same spot of the same street she had set out from, the coachman demanded his pay. She searched her pockets over again and again, but every search was unsuccessful. No money could she find. The man grew peremptory. She placed her bonnet on his head and ran away. Through many a street she then proceeded and met in none the least adventure till, on turning a corner of Bloomsbury Square, she met Maria. Cassandra started and Maria seemed surprised. They trembled, blushed, turned pale, and passed each other in mutual silence. Cassandra was next accosted by her friend the widow, who, squeezing out her little head through her window, asked her how she did. Cassandra curtsied and went on. A quarter of a mile brought her to her paternal roof in Bond Street, from which she had now been absent nearly 7 hours. She entered it and was pressed to her mother's bosom by that worthy woman. Cassandra smiled and whispered to herself, "This is a day well spent." Finis. I hope you enjoyed the Beautifull Cassandra. And now, without further ado, I hope you'll enjoy its spirited spin-off, A Young Lady's Incredible Brighton Adventure, featuring Miss Lydia Bennet. Chapter 1. The youngest of 5 daughters and, by her own admission, the liveliest of them all, Miss Lydia Bennet skipped down from the carriage in a flurry of delight, her excitement undimmed by the brevity of time already spent in Brighton. "La! How divine it all is!" she cried, spinning once on the gravel path before stopping to take in the scene. The scent of salt and sea foam filled her lungs, sharp, fresh, full of promise. Her heart fluttered. Brighton! How I adore you! This was the feeling she had long imagined through long, dull dinners and even duller sermons. Even now, it still felt like a dream come true. The laughter, the chatter, the distant strains of music, they wrapped around her like a ribbon, tying her to something thrilling and new. "I declare, I shall be quite the sensation this summer," she whispered, more to herself than to the unfamiliar faces around her. London might be grand with its towering buildings and bustling streets, Meryton comfortably familiar with its quaint charm, but Brighton, its crowded streets teeming with vibrant energy, each corner brimming with possibilities waiting to be discovered, was an enchanting stage, and she, its most dazzling performer, ready to bask in the spotlight of its lively atmosphere. Young Lydia was, of course, meant to be under constant supervision. Colonel and Mrs. Forster had been charged with the responsibility of maintaining her respectability, yet they were neither as watchful nor as swift as she was. Casting off such tedious restraints was a small and necessary liberty, one that allowed her to indulge, unfettered, in the splendor of her surroundings. Lydia's gaze danced across the crowded promenade, capturing the scarlet splash of officers' coats against the picturesque scene. The air was alive with the rustle of silk and lace as elegant ladies glided by, their parasols gently swaying and casting delicate shadows in the bright sunlight. A pair of officers passed close by, one offering her a polite bow. Lydia dipped her head in return, barely containing a grin. Behind her, 2 girls whispered behind gloved fingers. She caught only the words bold and pretty and decided they were meant for her. Brighton was like a dream brought to life, albeit a dream that required proper adornment. Her hand rose to her bonnet, a simple affair, suitable for casual walks to Meryton with her sisters, but entirely inadequate for such a scene. No, she must have something finer, something to set her apart. With this thought, her steps quickened toward a milliner's shop, where bonnets of every imaginable shade and trim were arranged in elegant disarray behind the window pane. Within moments, she was inside, trailing a gloved hand over ribbons and lace, considering, rejecting, until her gaze alighted upon a confection of pale blue silk, adorned with a delicate cascade of trim. Exquisite. La! This is perfect, she declared, reaching for it at once, securing it atop her curls with a flick of her fingers. She turned to the mirror, tilting her head this way and that, allowing the ribbons to flutter artfully. None of my sisters own anything so fine as this. She pictured Kitty's wide-eyed envy and Jane's gentle disapproval. Elizabeth would no doubt call it frivolous, though Lydia could not recall a time her second eldest sister had worn anything truly fashionable. Well, it was not for them to judge. She was the one in Brighton. A slight young woman with pale skin and tightly coiled brown hair tucked beneath a plain cap, the shop girl hesitated, her eyes darting briefly to the intricate embroidery that adorned the fabric, a clear indication of its uniqueness and special craftsmanship. "Miss," she said, her voice a mixture of caution and politeness, "that bonnet is a custom order." Lydia smiled at her reflection, quite untroubled. "Yes, of course it is, custom made for me. And since I am already here, I shall take it." Before the girl could summon a more coherent protest, Lydia swept toward the door. "You must charge it to Colonel Forster," she exclaimed with energy before stepping back onto the lively street. The bonnet, settled just so, had transformed her utterly. A lady of Brighton must possess a certain distinction, and she was now precisely as she ought to be. The afternoon sun warmed her shoulders as she wandered along the bustling walkways, delighting in the sights and sounds in the air of anticipation that seemed to linger over every encounter. Assured she was off to a good start, Lydia felt a bit of unease. Even the finest of bonnets did not alone constitute celebration, no, something sweet was required. A quaint pastry shop beckoned invitingly from the corner, its window display showcasing an array of decadent treats that were simply too enticing to resist. As she stepped inside, the warm, comforting aroma of freshly baked goods enveloped her, and her eyes sparkled with expectation as she surveyed the colorful selection before her. She hesitated for a beat. Would he ask for coin? She had none. But surely an officer's wife, or the young lady staying with one, could be trusted. And if not, well, charm and confidence often worked as well as a purse. "Strawberry, lemon, and vanilla," she declared with a poised lift of her chin, her voice filled with satisfaction. "Yes, all three." A thick-set man in a striped waistcoat, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, with a ruddy complexion and a fringe of graying hair pressed flat against his temples, the shopkeeper blinked at her enthusiasm but quickly complied, skillfully presenting her with delicate, artfully arranged glasses of chilled confections. Lydia eagerly took a spoonful of the strawberry delight, the rich flavor enveloping her senses as she let out a contented sigh, her pleasure evident and unabashed. "Oh, how delightful," she declared. "Brighton is even more wonderful than I imagined." She sampled each with eager abandon, barely letting one melt before tasting the next. Soon, only empty dishes remained. She dabbed her lips with a handkerchief, entirely satisfied. "That will be," the shopkeeper began. She waved a hand dismissively, her fingers dancing through the air. "I had half a mind to wait for race week," she mused playfully, "but truly, why should I?" Her eyes sparkled with mischief as she patted the man's arm, bestowing upon him a look of airy amusement that seemed to brighten the entire room. "Do be assured, I shall return with my friends, just you wait, they will all want exactly what I have had." With a graceful twirl, Lydia rose and quit the establishment, her spirits buoyant and lively, as if they were as light as the delicate silk ribbons that danced and fluttered behind her in a colorful parade. As she stepped onto the broad walk once more, the sea breeze gently lifted her curls, infusing the air with the invigorating scent of salt and the promise of adventure. Just ahead, her eyes were irresistibly drawn to a figure she knew all too well. Lieutenant George Wickham. Her heart leapt in her chest before the thought of his standing there even fully formed. He stood slightly apart from his fellow officers, his posture relaxed and assured, exuding an effortless charm. His smile, oh, his smile, was as careless and knowing as ever, a perfect reflection of a gentleman with all the best parts of beauty in his favor, basking in the glow of his own charisma. Lydia tilted her head thoughtfully, her eyes lingering on him with a mixture of calculation and admiration. There had been a time when Miss Mary King, with all her naivety, had nearly secured him, foolish girl. Only to let him slip through her fingers like grains of sand. Lydia, however, was no such fool. She supposed she understood Wickham in a way no one else did, seeing beyond his charming facade to the complexity beneath. He was daring, a man too clever and restless to be shackled to any dull, simpering creature. He needed someone vibrant and spirited, someone who could match his zest for life, his sharp wit. Someone precisely like her, who saw the world as an adventure waiting to unfold. Yes, he had scarcely acknowledged her presence in Meryton, thanks, no doubt, to her sister Elizabeth, who had monopolized his attentions. But here, in Brighton, the dynamics would shift. Here, she would not be overshadowed. A delicious thrill coursed through her veins, as if fate itself had orchestrated this serendipitous moment. Her heart raced, urging her feet to quicken their pace. She subtly angled herself into his line of sight, a graceful maneuver executed with the precision of an artist's brushstroke, enough to catch his attention, but not so overt as to betray her intentions. She fluttered her eyes delicately, while she curved her lips into the barest hint of a smile. He turned around slowly. For one breathless moment, their eyes locked, a connection charged with unspoken possibilities that seemed to hang in the air like an invisible force. Her heart skipped a beat, and the world around them faded into a soft blur, leaving only the intensity of their shared gaze. And then, just as swiftly as it had begun, he looked away, breaking the spell. Lydia's step hesitated as her foot caught on an uneven stone. Yet, her confidence remained unwavering, not diminished in the slightest by the minor misstep. Her lips pursed slightly, but it was a gesture of determination rather than worry. She had caught his eye, and that singular achievement was of utmost importance. The glimmer of attention from him was like a spark igniting her optimism. Tomorrow, or perhaps the day after, she was certain he would approach her, his curiosity piqued. And with that anticipated conversation, her Brighton adventure would truly begin. As Lydia savored the prospect with immense self-satisfaction, only one question swirled in her eager mind. Whatever shall I wear, when he does? Thanks for listening. Stay tuned for more mischief, more mayhem, and a series of twists and turns you won't see coming, because Lydia is just getting started. Subscribe today to be among the first to know when the complete story is released. And remember, your likes, comments, and subscribes help this channel grow.